Hi there, and welcome to the Third Impact Anime Podcast, where we talk about anime, video games, and conventions, with a healthy amount of existential dread mixed in. You can find out more about our podcast by following us on Twitter at TI_anime, or just like us on Facebook to not see our posts, because that's just how it is now. Thanks again for stopping by, and enjoy the show!
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another hopefully excellent episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast. I'm the host, Austin, here, and with me I've got Sully.
Hi.
And I've also got Bill.
Hello.
Are you guys happy and healthy this evening?
I am fit as a fiddle. Sure, let's go with that.
Today, we're going to be talking about Marie Kondo and the KonMari method. That's something that's kind of been rising in popularity lately, and we all sort of have different thoughts about how like this particular thing and this particular person, like what thoughts she has and ideas can contribute directly to like anime fans or like fandom in general, and like quote unquote, as Sully would say it, like the otaku lifestyle. And I'm sure he'll explain more about that in a little bit. But before we get into that, what's everybody been up to?
So I have had a few days before I have to start my summer classes to get my degree and graduate and move on with my life and face that terrifying void. And I've been spending that time watching Agretzko on Netflix and catching up with some of the anime that I started for the season. Had Yatsura playing on in the background as I normally do. Have been I think the thing I've been doing most in my like sudden downtime that I don't know what to do with is playing the new Kirby game, Star Allies. I just finished that
Nice.
About 2 days ago, and then I, as a sort of graduation present to myself, I walked over to Lost Ark and I got Link Between Worlds for $1 because I had a store credit I had sat on for some time, and I after finishing Kirby, I just started that. I haven't really gotten far because I've had to run errands, but I've been doing more gaming than I have watching any sort of series. I've had Agretzko on in the background while working on panels or doing personal writing, but I haven't actually sat down and watched anything like and focused my entire attention. It's a great show to kind of have on while you do other things because it's so fast paced.
Yeah, I think both of you now have gotten through Agretzko, and I haven't even started it yet. But like everyone that I've heard talk about it has said it's really good and has some really like relatable moments. So that's good that it's really resonating with people. That's fun. It seems
yeah,
like
I mean, I hated
show.
my job too, so.
I think everybody either like has been there or is there right now to a degree, especially if you're like in your post high school era, or probably some people still in high school that are just like, oh man, my job is the worst. My coworkers are bad, and I just want to scream death metal at the karaoke bar. Or
Oh,
whatnot.
sweetheart, it only gets worse.
Yay! But hey, you know, communal empathy through watching anime. That's a good thing. So at Anime Club yesterday, we all watched, we did like a marathon of My Hero Academia for Free Comic Book Day. And I'd seen the first season, and Bill, you're almost caught up, right?
No, I'm trying to though. It's the other because I'm doing a lot more writing for the website, which everyone should check out at www.thirdimpactanime.wordpress.com. Shameless plug.
It's not shameless. They're listening to our podcast. They're here to be shamed. But I guess more because, you know, Bill, you've already seen it. You're already into it. You're in for it. And me too. I'm just not caught up. But Sully, what do you think of My Hero Academia since you hadn't seen it yet?
So I have some questions.
Okay, if it's about the toes, I don't want to hear it.
It was that, also the hair thing.
Hair? What hair thing? Oh,
Please
the hair thing.
my hair, and then you will gain my powers.
And
Is that how it works? I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, I liked it enough that I want to continue it. We watched the first episode and the 2 season recaps, and we kind of stopped there, and it was enough to kind of say, oh, I think this is something I would enjoy, because I've been kind of burnt out on superhero. As we will continue to talk about, I have no idea. I don't watch Marvel movies, and I don't say that to be hipster. It's just like, it's just not my cup of tea. So I'm so in the dark with that. But I've always been a huge Batman fan, and I've been really burnt out with like the fact that DC doesn't even know what it's doing anymore and hasn't been good since the like late 80s. But so I was telling Princess, like, oh, me and Batman are going through a trial separation right now. Mommy and Daddy are working through some things. And I think My Hero Academia's it's anime enough for me to want to watch it, and superhero enough for me to think, okay, I kind of understand where this is coming from. It's interesting to see another culture kind of play with conventions that we kind of know in the background growing up, like the sound effects. I know it's like the boom and the smack that are very much, of American comics more so than manga, and the bright colors and the way they explain the superpowers is very much like an interesting combination of manga and traditional American comics. So it's enough for me to say, I'll give it a shot. For me, villains are always a thing that I love. Batman villains. I love them all very dearly. They're the reason I read those comics, and I'm hoping that My Hero, from what I've seen, they seem to have some characters I could latch, fight for the wrong side of the law, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like their villains are they're interesting, but at the same time, like My Hero Academia doesn't really have the interesting heroes deficiency that a lot of like Western comic books might have, because like usually when it comes to Western comics, and I mean like the mainline ones, like the big two, like DC and Marvel, it's like if you're not really so much interested in like the title hero, then like what grabs your interest is definitely the rogues gallery. And like when it comes to characters like Batman and Spider-Man and whatnot, it's like there's the one hero and then like all these villains. But with My Hero Academia, there's like it's like a whole giant team of heroes, and they all like have to work together. Whereas something like Avengers, which we'll get into a little bit because Bill and I want to talk about Infinity War for a second, they more are like these sort of like big personalities that all get stuck in the same room, and it seems like it's a lot more trouble for them to try and work together. But like with My Hero Academia, it's like it's all about working together, and they're all very interesting, fun characters that are easy to latch on to. So I think that's
something I noticed watching is that in a lot of American superhero media, the whole big personalities thing is a huge like selling point, because you don't want Superman to be playing the background character, because you're going to alienate your readers. But in My Hero, like we were watching the swimming episode, the recap they do with that, and it's I kind of picked up that like the more they fight or the more they don't get along, the worse things go for them. So it's kind of the narrative is playing with this idea of like, no, you have to work together. There is no room for having an ego. The spiky mean boy, the more he has an ego, the more it kind of backfires on him. And it's kind of interesting to see that play out in a way that feels more natural than it sometimes does in American comics. It makes me think of a lot of Alex Ross's Justice miniseries that came out, I think, like 2006. It's kind of a play on like the old Super Friends, and it's very colorful and bright, but the stakes are higher. So that kind of makes me think of My Hero, that playful, but there's still like some weight to the story.
Yeah. Speaking of weight to a story, Bill.
Yeah.
Avengers Infinity War.
Yes, I finally saw it.
Okay. What did you think of Infinity War?
Overall, I felt like as a comic book movie, if this was a comic book event, it would be pretty good. As a movie, I had a few problems with it. One, I feel like the juxtaposition of going back and forth between different groups was a bit jarring for a movie. And because the Marvel movies have always kind of had a lighter tone, excluding Civil War to a certain extent, I'm going to be interested to see if there's going to be any backlash towards Infinity War, because it's a very dark movie compared to Thor Ragnarok or the Guardians movies that have come before. But overall, I liked it. I liked Thanos as a bad guy. I felt like they gave him stakes and they gave him reasoning, unlike most Marvel bad guys who have been grumble, grumble, grumble. I just want to destroy the world. Grumble, grumble, grumble. Mm-hmm. I like the team ups like Iron Man and Spider-Man. I thought that was really fun. And I'm just really curious where they're going to go with the Marvel universe after Avengers 4, because they've been building up to Thanos since Iron Man 1. So now if that big bad's out of the way, what's the steam that's going to keep the train going?
I just hope that well, okay, to go back to to one of the points that you made, I feel like if there was going to be any backlash to this film, we would know about it already. So I feel like the audiences are generally fine with it because they know that the resolution is it's only a year away. Like, we're getting a sequel to this movie in like no time.
The reason I say that is I'm just thinking if I was an 8-year-old or 10-year-old kid going to see this movie, I'd be probably bawling my eyes out, because in every movie I've seen so far, every superhero has won or beaten the bad guy. So I'm just surprised, like, families are mad at Avengers Infinity War for it's death and it's violence, and I'm just surprised that hasn't been a big talking point, because the movie is very dark, but it has its purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're living in like a sort of the post Dark Knight era of like superhero movies, and like those movies were pretty dark, and there's a lot of death and a lot of like pretty serious stuff in there. So I feel like whenever that stuff comes up, like audiences aren't blindsided by it anymore.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Marvel movies are sort of like death is an inconvenient sort of thing because many characters just sort of reappear and whatnot. But that's like a comic book thing. Like you would know that for sure.
Yeah, like if you're a common Western comic book reader, you should know that there's no such real thing as death in superhero comics. In Marvel, the only people who are truly dead are Uncle Ben and Gwen Stacy.
And Aunt May is never allowed to die.
Nope. For some reason we have to have that matriarch. For some reason.
As in terms of myself, I also really enjoyed Infinity War. I thought it was a great sort of culmination of everything that's come before. And I definitely hear you with the jumping back and forth between the groups, but I'm like, there's really not any other way they could have done it. Like, and I think that might be something that gets better with repeat viewings because you already know like what's going to happen and when and all that.
Yeah, for what they had to do, I feel they did really well because everyone got a moment and everyone got kind of funny moments. And if you're into the most recent, like Black Panther, you got a good Black Panther segment towards the end, and you have to see everyone from there again. So I think what'll make this movie, in my mind, is greater is when Avengers 4 eventually gets released, because even though they say it's another movie, they basically split the movie in half, because the Avengers Infinity War is 2.5 hours, and they knew no audience would stand being in the theater for 5 to 6 hours.
Right, that's definitely for sure.
My one question that I am kind of wondering from Infinity War is where are they going to go after Thanos? Because, the Avengers are probably going to beat him in 4. So I'm just wondering what big bad could take the place of something they could build to for the next phase of the Marvel Universe.
Mm, what I hope, probably against hope, is that they just keep doing like new and more interesting like little side stories with not quite as like high stakes, because I don't want the Marvel universe to turn into like Dragon Ball Z where they keep trying to like one up over and over and over, because Thanos is kind of like a Frieza-esque character, and if they keep doing like all the big bads like in order, it's just going to feel like exhausting after a while. um so I hope what they do is that they just make more like really good smaller stories. Like there was a lot of weight in Black Panther, but it wasn't like world crushing weight. You know what I mean? It was like a very personal story, and that's what made it weighty. And that was the same thing for like Spider-Man Homecoming. And it was a little bit weightier, but like Thor Ragnarok, also the stakes were not like, I mean, they were pretty high, but well, they were really high in that movie, so maybe don't count that one. But I think you know what I mean. Like more movies like Ant-Man and Spider-Man and Black Panther and stuff like that, just really sort of expand the Marvel universe into like those other characters. Or like whenever some of the title characters like Cap and Iron Man, like those actors are gonna move on probably pretty soon in one way or another. And like seeing other characters sort of step into that role and sort of the universal and like situational implications of that are interesting things to explore. So I hope that's what they do.
Well, my thinking is if the Fox Disney merger actually goes through, they're going to do Avengers versus X-Men, or they can use Doctor Doom as the big bad.
Yeah, I mean that's probably what they want to do, but I'm saying what I wish would happen, but probably my wishes will not be granted.
Probably because I enjoy the X-Men, especially with what Fox has been doing with Wolverine. I like that Marvel's exploring their more obscure characters, and with if the Fox deal goes through, then I'm afraid those obscure character movies are gonna go bye. It's been nice knowing you.
Yeah, I guess.
But
we'll
where
see how
does
that works
Frasier
out.
fit into all this?
You're gonna have to explain that, Sully.
Okay, so here's again. I don't watch Marvel movies, and I don't understand. I've never read Marvel comics. I've only ever read Batman comics growing up, and so all I know is there's a big pink guy with a gold glove and chaos emeralds, and he kills everyone, and they disintegrate. And before I knew this, I follow an out of context Frasier Twitter. Because I love Frasier, and they had an image of Frasier like evaporating, and it's saying like Niles, please, and I just reblogged it because I just thought it was just funny. I thought it was just like a random meme, and someone said that's spoilers for Infinity War. I'm like, so Frasier's in it?
Yes, Frasier is.
And so I was very confused, and I didn't know when Kelsey Grammer became a Marvel hero or when, the Frasier universe became, absorbed within the canon, and I'm still lost. Did he die?
It's funny you mentioned that, because Kelsey Grammer actually does play the Beast in X-Men 3, The Last Stand, and he also reprises his role in Days of Future Past. So technically, I guess Frasier is in the Marvel universe.
Or the dream, Frasier Crane is Doctor Doom.
Oh my gosh. Could you imagine?
I'm listening.
All right, so enough about stupid American manga, aka comic books. I guess we can jump in and actually talk about what we're here to talk about, which is the KonMari method. Sully, you sort of introduced us to this weird yet surprisingly insightful and very helpful thing. So can you explain what the KonMari method is?
So it's kind of several things. It's sort of a life philosophy, which again makes it sound really cultish. It's kind of a spin-off in a way from minimalism. I personally prefer it to minimalism. It's a way of organizing your belongings in your household and finding ways to prioritize the things you care about in your life, be they pursuits or physical objects or even just the kind of thoughts that you have. And it was developed by this Japanese woman named Marie Kondo, who wrote 2 books about it, and she's working on the 3rd, and has a manga adaptation, the life-changing manga of tidying up. And she sort of inspired she's created this little cottage industry of the KonMari method, where she tells you how to fold your clothes and how to organize your papers and how to clean your house. And, I was introduced to it by a friend of mine who told me to read the book. I asked, "Oh, well, can I borrow it?" No, I tossed it out, and that was kind of fitting for her method.
Wow.
And, well, she didn't just toss it out. She sold it to a used bookstore. But I did eventually read it, and I read it mostly because I had a lot of things in my life, like physical things that were just cluttering my space. And I was moving between dorms and moving back home and then moving to an apartment and then moving back home to a dorm to finish going to school and getting a minor and then going to move again into another apartment. And as I kept doing that, like going home for the summer or changing dorms or whatever, I just noticed all this stuff that I had and how much of it either I had no place to put it or I would just crowd it in, and it would just be uncomfortable and awkward and full of things that I really just did not like, but I didn't want to like just throw away or get rid of, or I thought, oh, well, I'll miss it. Or, oh, I remember I got this because I hung out with my friends that day and I won this keychain or whatever. And so I read this book kind of saying, okay, I'm not big into self-help, but, I'll try it. I'll read it. It sounds at least interesting. And Marie Kondo is, if anything, an interesting person. And so I kind of, around Christmas this year, I sat down and did my first sort of KonMari purge. And originally I was going to write an article about it, but as I kept trying to sit and write it, it became kind of like a diary. And then it turned into a thing where I would have wanted to have more of a discussion. So I decided we would do it as a podcast. And I'm kind of glad that we put it off until now because my own kind of views on KonMari and sort of the reasons why I did it have changed and shifted, and I think have reached kind of a more polished state than I had originally.
So what's your initial takes on this, Bill? Like, what do you think about it? Since I've kind of been exploring some of the facets of minimalism myself, and Sully and I sort of off discussed it on in various ways since he introduced the idea of doing an article about it a couple months back. But what do you think about it?
I think it's a real interesting method because basically the way she talks about it is if it seems the clutter in our life, the things that make up your house or your apartment, it consumes you where it just keeps you. It's basically busy work where it distracts you from your goals that you want to accomplish or that you wish to accomplish. It's kind of the way I saw it. And if you do one super clean and have things organized and just figure out what you care about and what you don't care about definitively, then you can then focus on your greater goals. Like it could be getting that job you want or figuring out, am I in a happy relationship? Do I want to take this relationship to the next step? Am I happy where I live? But because we're consumed by the things that we own, we lose sight of that.
And I think a lot of sort of her, quote unquote method is stuff that like, I think everybody sort of implicitly knows that the accumulation of stuff does not necessarily make you a happier or more like enlightened person or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with collecting. I mean, I'm definitely a collector. I got a lot of crap. but like a lot of the crap that we have, we don't really need. And I think everybody knows that, but I think what Marie Kondo does a really good job of, if not a little bit too sort of Puritan maybe sometimes, is that she sort of articulates sort of the ideas that I think a lot of us already feel about our stuff. Like I think everyone at the end of the day can sit and think about like, well, you know, what makes me really happy are my relationships and my friendships with other people and the experiences that I have in my life, not necessarily all the crap that you accumulate. And I think that she does a good job of articulating that.
And I'm going to preface this by saying I think she's absolutely completely out of her nut.
She is about some things, but I mean,
I revere her, and I think she's a pretty, you know, smart person, obviously an incredible businesswoman, and, you know, obviously very put together. But something she kind of says is a little, I'd like to recommend therapy to her, and, you know, maybe sitting down with someone who could talk about the fact that she can sort of obsessively categorize very personal things, and it sometimes comes off as a bit robotic and odd, but like personally, like I tried folding my clothes in her method, and I did it for about 6 months, and after a while I got so tired of it. I'm just folding my shirts like I have folded my shirts since I was, you know, 7. You know, I'm not going to change because it supposedly saves drawer space, and it really didn't. I mean, so I think there's room for relaxation. As much as she says you have to do it this way, there is room to kind of figure out your own way of doing this. And again, I'm kind of using KonMari as a jumping point to like a bigger discussion of like the nerd community, be that like anime or comics or anything that revolves around fascination with pop culture. So much of that is built on buying and consuming things. And I think we're kind of hitting points in our generation where it's getting unhealthy. And so that was something that when I started my little journey with this, you know, she says, you know, picture what you want your life to be like and be very specific. And I thought, well, I want the things I really and truly care about to be, you know, close at hand, but I want to not necessarily feel like my entire identity is based around the media I consume. So that was kind of my goal with this is I see things I don't like or that I worry about. Let me take proactive steps to kind of fix that within my own life.
Mm. Well, I think you're right in that it seems to be, especially if you go to, especially in kind of nerd culture stuff, it's about consumer goods. But I think that comes from a place of back in the day, you couldn't get so-and-so figure of your favorite show. And now the market is specifically catering to nerds. And so I think that's kind of what has opened the floodgates. I mean, there's a great documentary called The Toys That Made Us, if anyone has seen that. There's a particular episode on He-Man, I remember, where they say, yeah, the He-Man toys I couldn't afford, but now I can just go to this con dedicated to He-Man and get the figure that I always wanted as a child. So it's basically the nerds have taken the business roles that their parents once had, and now they're trying to just appeal to the nerds.
And nerd culture is also mainstream, and that comes with a whole swath of people trying to, you know, buy and sell things to, you know, the most amount of people as possible, which is just sort of inherent in, you know, like a materialist society that most of the world kind of lives in. And that, you know, America being so focused on its major export as being like entertainment is like the worldwide hub of that. And Japan is very much similar in that way with sort of otaku goods and anime being such a big part of their pop culture.
And we in America, we are a materialistic nation. It's just kind of built within our nature and our foundation as a country too.
Definitely.
And I don't necessarily want to say these sort of things and do it in a kind of condescending way, because I think there is a very healthy way of approaching thought like this. Like what I was telling Austin is like, if it were up to me, I want to be like the weeaboo Martha Stewart, where, I like the idea of like living a lifestyle through your hobbies, but not letting your hobbies necessarily define you. And that sounds kind of like that sounds a bit like hypocritical, but I think there is a difference. I think there's a difference between me saying I really like watching and writing about and engaging with the anime community, but I don't necessarily feel like my entire personality is based on the objects that I kind of consume. I mean, I have a lot of interests as a person, and even beyond what I'm interested in, even if we talk about like adult interests, like reading literature or
Food.
or food, or being, like a gourmet. Like there's also like your personal values or the experiences that you want to have, or how you interact with others, that I think we sometimes kind of forget. Because I mean, we wear the T-shirts and we buy the figures and stuff, but then there's this point of, there's a point where it's okay, and then I think there's a point where it's like you are just a billboard for things now. You're no longer your own. You're not making it your own. And I think part of doing something like KonMari is kind of saying, this is what I like, but this is how I make it my own. I'm really in the Rocky Horror community, and I am friends with people who collect a lot of like vintage like playbills and stuff. And some of them collect everything, like for every single production that's come out since like 1973. And then like me, I like things that are interesting, and I don't want to just be this one play / movie I love, but I want to show that it's a part of me. I want to show that Sailor Moon is a part of me and affected me growing up, or Batman, or whatever other thing that, really spoke to me. I want to say, hey, this is something I enjoy. I want to put a figure in my home or wear a T-shirt, but I don't want to just be, I am only these things.
Mm-hmm. I think it just comes from this fear, just because maybe you talk about one thing a lot. Like for me, I talk a lot about Hearthstone, but that doesn't mean that Hearthstone is my sole thing that I care about. I'm really into hiking. I really am into Doctor Who audio plays. I'm really into podcasting. I think the key thing is you just have to just take it in moderation. And when you're around people, just realize that maybe they don't want to talk about Hearthstone every single moment of the day.
I think a lot of this is just like adults sort of coming out of adolescence, where like most of folks' adolescence is really sort of defined by the things that you're interested in. And that definitely does carry over into adulthood. But once you're in adulthood and your identity is more like solidified, and you sort of figured out who you are as a person generally, I guess that it sort of becomes like you as a person define who you are as a person, not necessarily what you consume or what you are. So if that is all, as nerds, a large part of our identity is based around the things that we enjoy. A lot of our, especially for me, myself, like a lot of my most meaningful relationships are based around the things that I share a mutual enjoyment with others with. But I guess that it's also like, if I'm going to choose to express my love for like Evangelion or something like that, like I would much rather have like one very nice Evangelion thing rather than trying to buy like 30 different like mediocre Evangelion things. And I think that's a lot of where Marie Kondo is coming from. Like, I think that, I might be giving her a little bit too much credit, I guess, but I think a lot of her like idiosyncratic like ways of thinking about things are just to sort of get people in that mindset of like extreme tidying, I guess, to sort of push them to the edge of being like, I don't know, like maybe she's being a little bit tougher on people and tougher on her audience to get people to make those initial steps. But like, there was a Q&A with her that I watched, and she was like responding to somebody's question about something, and then she sort of hinted at that like really at the end of the day, it's very like her method is like a very personal thing. Like it's all about what sparks joy in people. And she said a line that was along the lines of like, if having a lot of things, like even if you have a lot of stuff, but all that stuff still sparks joy in you, that is still kind of part of the KonMari method. It's just about, reducing the amount of crap that you have to only the crap that you have that makes you happy. And
I think that's
I totally get that. That's valid and fair, and that's cool.
And I think that's a very important thing to bring up is the idea of like sparking joy, and it's kind of the comparisons KonMari has gotten to minimalism. So spark joy is this idea, like let's say like on my desk I have this figure of long hair Bananya that Marissa, our fellow third impactor, gave me as a present. And I pick it up, I'm physically holding it, and I think, is this something that sparks joy? And when I see it, I think, well, this character, this little, cat from this cute series is something that, like, everyone teases me, oh, Sully, that's you. You're a long-haired Bananya, especially Marissa. And she saw it and said, I saw it and instantly thought of you, and I got it for you. And now every time I look at it, I think of how cute it is, how I'm like, yes, I kind of see myself. I like how my friends see me as being like this character, and I like that Marissa saw it and thought of me enough by it to give it to me as a gift. So it sparked joy, and that's putting words on it. And she really kind of says, don't try to explain it, but you can't really say that in a podcast that's very based on audio. And so and that can be anything. Like I have also kind of learned things I don't have. So since I'm in kind of a transitional housing thing right now, I did not bring all of my stuff, but I really miss my Link Figma that I got. It was like the first figure I got that was nice. And I don't have it. It's packed up at home in storage. And I just, I frequently think, God, I miss having it nearby. I miss playing with it. I miss posing it. And so that's something that kind of by absence I've learned is something that sparks joy in me. Now, something that doesn't spark joy is I have a ton of keychains I've gotten either as gifts or, impulse buys at cons or, prints that I don't really like anymore or things like that you feel like you have to hold on to, but they don't really do anything for you, and you're not really thrilled to have them, and that you forget that you have them. I mean, I always end up having little boxes under my bed of stuff I just forget I have because I don't use it. And I think that's the difference between something like KonMari and minimalism, where I watched the documentary on it on Netflix, and the guys who do it, I don't want to say necessarily that they're kind of haughty about it because they had very tragic lives, but there is this idea of minimalism as being something that very wealthy people do and that they kind of act. It's kind of like maybe how some people might view veganism or something that's a hobby for the elite to kind of, have less and then somehow still have more than you. As someone,
I think that all really boils down to framing, like how you frame these certain ideas.
Right. And I think with KonMari, because it is based on, it's not necessarily you get rid of everything or you try to live with just the bare minimum. It's you decide how much or how little, and it's cutting the fat rather than, getting rid of everything.
And it's sort of like coming to the personal realization that if you're stressed out by having so much stuff, you don't need to have all that stuff. You can just get rid of it.
Yeah, and based on what you said, Sully, it sounds to me like the wealthy people who are doing the minimalism, it sounds like to me it's like an act of rebellion of, I have all this money, but look, I don't need all the things that show that I am wealthy.
I think that's kind of like an overgeneralization too, because it's not like just wealthy people do the minimalism thing, but I definitely hear where you're coming from.
Well, in that case, I didn't mean that to say as an overall thought.
Yeah, I was just making clarification. I get where you're coming from.
And I think in a way, all of this is a bit of a rebellion because I have met people in various fan circles who they do buy everything for their chosen obsession. Like I have met Sailor Moon fans who will buy everything, even if it's, impractical. I don't wear lipstick. So I don't need the Sailor Moon lipstick if it's just going to sit in the tube on a shelf and not do anything, and it's not really that attractive to me. Or, I'm going to diss American merchandise for a second, but a lot of the stuff you see in the Hot Topic I don't think is that visually appealing or interesting, so I pass on it. But I've met people who are like, no, it has Sailor Moon written on it, so I'm going to buy it. And I think we kind of, as fans, sometimes build this idea of we prove our loyalty or we prove our identity through our purchase. And so I've kind of reframed myself as, the fact that I care about something is enough. I don't have to prove my loyalty to a thing with buying it from a store. And I think that's kind of going into gatekeeping too. Like, oh, you're a fan, but you don't have like the $3,000 life-size Devilman statue that only came out in 1983 and only had 600 printed. I'm like, no, because I don't have that kind of money, or I think that would be a little mad to do something like that, unless that statue really like made you entirely beyond happy.
Sully, do you have that statue?
No.
Fake fan.
but that's something you do come across, is people saying, if you don't have this thing, like there is like merchandise and monetary gatekeeping that happens. And I think we as a community need to kind of push back against that. Not everyone has the resources or even the interest. There's some stuff I'm like, that's just not my cup of tea to own, even if it is something I for a fandom or a character I like. It's just, I don't think it's that nice to me.
Well, when it comes to gatekeeping, I don't think it's material goods. I think it's more knowledge when it comes to gatekeeping. Like, I'm going to use One Piece, for example. If I was a snooty One Piece fan, I would be, tell me the tragic backstory of Nico Robin and tell me what arc it was and tell me which manga chapter it was. I think that's more common with nerddom when it comes to gatekeeping is, do you know? Or in Western fandom, it'd be like, Austin, tell me what episode did the Seventh Doctor meet the Cybermen for their 25th anniversary? Something like that.
Pass.
Trust me, it wasn't that good. It was Revenge of the Cybermen.
Thanks for letting me know, Bill. Thanks. I'll remember that if I'm on Jeopardy. British Jeopardy.
British Jeopardy, exactly. But I think the thing is when it comes to fandom and gatekeeping is just BS to make yourself feel superior. And you can just talk about your fandom. Like, that's what I do with One Piece, where I'll talk about it to my good friend Michael, talk about it every week. Or when it comes to Hearthstone, I have friends that I'll talk to it about. Or with Doctor Who, I'll talk to Austin about it. But I don't feel like I have to buy the latest version of the Dr. Screwdriver or have the absolute knowledge of how many times did the Solarians deal with the Sixth Doctor, stuff like that.
I think it's important too to also make the clarification that, like, if you are that fan, that if it says Sailor Moon on it, or if it says, Evangelion on it, and you buy it and that's how you express your fandom, you know what? That's totally valid. You do you. You're no less or more of a fan of that thing than anybody else. And if that's what makes you happy, then go for it. But I'm just like, I think what we're all trying to say, and what the KonMari method kind of also says, is that, like, you don't need that stuff to validate your existence or your happiness as a person or as a fan of a thing.
I think it all just depends on how do you like expressing it, and are you doing it in a safe way where it's not consuming your life monetarily or mentally.
And one thing that I think is kind of important when talking about things like this is also just maybe like some ethics. And I use that term really loosely when buying things. Like, I've really discovered that I like buying used things when I can.
Same here.
Used manga. We have a local used bookstore that we frequent very often, to the point that the other day I said, Austin, we go every week. I want to go somewhere else. And I personally, and I'm not, again, I really want to open this as something that's more of a, try it and see if it might make you feel better, because when I did and I got rid of stuff, it made me feel better. And also giving it to other fans or selling it, made me feel better. Like, I know it's probably going to go to someone who hopefully isn't just going to have it sit in their clutter pile, but they're going to appreciate it in a way that I couldn't. But like, I'm personally trying not to use Amazon anymore because I don't like the way they treat their employees or their business practices or the effects they've had on the publishing industry. So I try to buy either from the used bookstore that I visit locally and is a small company that only has a few stores, or through eBay, which is probably also terrible, but I right now have less compulsions with eBay. But I try to find different ways of getting the things I want if that's possible. So a lot of manga, if it's not brand new, you can find it through most used bookstores or through eBay or through fans at conventions pretty easily and for a lot cheaper, or DVDs, Blu-rays, things like that. Or even clothing. Like, I never wore graphic t-shirts until like a year or two ago, because what I wore was very heavily policed when I was going through that age when most young fans are like going to the Hot Topic. But I've learned it's like, I found some vintage like anime t-shirts that I really like and that they're comfortable, and I feel a little better about that than spending money at a store that's selling it new and it's going to be contributing to the problem of sustainability in the fashion industry.
Mm-hmm. And I think you brought up something interesting too about like the eBay thing and Amazon and whatnot. Like, and this just sparked the thought in me as well. Like, a lot of people will go to conventions and be like, wow, gosh, this stuff is so expensive. I can easily get it online on Amazon so much cheaper. And there is a lot of truth to that. But I think at the same time, like, I guess ethically, I would rather support somebody who, like, goes around the country and sells like their, anime goods at conventions than just throw another like 12 or 15 bucks at Amazon. Like, I mean, there's obviously like a logical level of leeway that you can give to some people. Like, if somebody is really selling something for way more than it's worth, I mean, obviously, don't buy it. But at the same time, if it's like, the difference of like $5, I would, personally, I would much rather throw it the way towards somebody who's like trying to make a living and doing this personally, rather than throw it at some like giant company or whatnot.
That's why I'm a big fan of like Right Stuff. Is, I mean, they're a company, but they're not a large company. And they're like, if I want something anime related and it's something new, I've just started going to Right Stuff, because I've emailed them before. I had a problem like with a payment, like they messed up my credit card or something, and I emailed them like, oh, we're so sorry. Yeah, well, like, I got a human being, and that was nice. And I know that they go around the country, and like, I've been to their booths at cons and they give me good discounts just for being there in person and buying. Like, I'd rather support like a smaller company that like wants to be a part of the community, either that being like the anime community or like Lost Ark, the video game store that, is where we live. And I know that I see them both like at local events here and just like in my daily life, like at the store. Like, I'd rather support that than what I believe to be a company attempting to, one, destroy the book industry and also take over the world.
And I know that that's kind of easy for us to say because all of us are like, we go to cons, fairly frequently. Some of us more than others, and we're very lucky to have like a lot of good resources for used stuff around us. But not everyone necessarily has that, unfortunately. But I think there are some decent options online, like companies, like smaller companies like Discotheque Bill. I know you preach that pretty heavily, as do I. And Right Stuff, that are like, they're outside of that big box store sort of, community, for lack of a better term.
Well, as I'm going to be the devil's advocate for a quick second.
Don't you
because sorry, because the truth is I don't go to cons a lot. And I think the way it works usually is when you're growing up and when you're in college, you don't have a lot of money. So you're going to you're going to use the cheapest option available, legally or illegally.
Very
but
fair.
as you get older and you start to get an income, then you start actually paying for stuff. I just think that's how we as a generation have become at this point, and that's how future generations are going to go, because torrenting is never going to go away, even though Crunchyroll is super cheap and at what, $7 a month,
Something like that. Yeah.
something like that. And then that's the way I kind of see it, is if I can support locally, like going to Right Stuff, or if I'm at a con, rarely I will try and buy something from, like, let's say Discotheque, because I love Discotheque.
Mm-hmm.
But because I'm have a low, I will go for the sale. And I think that's the thing, is support locally when you can, but don't feel that you're obligated to it. I think the core message of this thing is find your way, and it could be through any method.
Don't
Like,
lose
for me,
your way.
Yeah, yeah. What's the Fleetwood Mac song? You could go your own way.
Two very different references there, Bill. Kill la Kill and Fleetwood Mac. Where's that mashup?
Make that happen.
Kill the man.
John, do it.
And talking about that, like, again, it really is, like I said, I tried folding my clothes the KonMari way, and I just got kind of sick of it. I think, folding it the normal way is not going to hurt. And like I said, I didn't want to make this like a moralizing, like, you shouldn't buy from Amazon, it makes you a horrible person. Like, for me, my personal choice was, I want to do this because of XYZ reasons, and I'm not going to like try to dissuade anyone one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And like another thing, like Austin, one thing that happened with you in the vintage anime group that we're in, you posted something you had bought that had belonged to a fan, and you tried to track them down. And
Yeah.
I thought that was just such an amazing experience. Like, you bought something used, and then you had like that kind of connection with another person. I think that kind of happens when you go to like these otaku flea markets, or when you buy locally from used stores or whatever. You kind of see like, oh, this is part of a community of people sharing things they love.
Let me go grab that thing, because I forgot the gentleman's name, but I'll tell that story, since probably most of the people listening are not in that Facebook group, but you totally should be. So hold that thought 1 second. So basically what happened, the story was I recently watched, I think I mentioned it on an episode or something. I recently watched, and this was a couple months ago at this point, so not that recent, but anyway, I watched Arcadia of My Youth, the Captain Harlock film, and I really, really enjoyed that movie. So I wanted to get more into Harlock things, but I wasn't quite ready to jump full long into watching the actual TV series, because that was a little bit longer of a commitment than what I wanted to get into at that time. So I went online and found a pretty cheap copy of the Queen Emeraldus OVA that came out in the 90s, I believe. And it was on VHS. It's the old ADV Films release of it. And I bought it used, the first volume of the first 2 episodes, for like, I don't know, $6 or $7. And upon getting it in the mail, I saw that there is a property of sticker on the tape itself. And it was a property of a gentleman named Paul Roberts. And it has like his contact information, like his email address, his phone number, like 2 different phone numbers, a P.O. box, and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, this guy's got all of his info on here. I'll just send him an email or something, or give him a call and be like, hey man, I got your tape, and I got it from a seller in Arizona, and it says you were based out of Utah, and now it's in North Carolina. So isn't that wacky? But then after a little bit of digging online, I realized that this gentleman had actually passed away in a car accident back in 2011. And I figured that out by just searching his full name in Utah, and then the obituary article came up, and it said in his obituary that he was a computer programmer and a fan of sci-fi comics and TV shows and stuff. And I thought, there's just no way that, there could be another person from the same town with the same set of interests and this tape not have come from him. So I posted about it in the Vintage Anime Fans group, and it got a lot of attention. And I just thought that, like, it was just so interesting that a piece of his large collection that I assume his family sort of sold off and whatnot after his passing, like, it ended up all the way out in Arizona from Utah, and then all the way back to me 7 years later, that pieces of his collection are probably still floating out there, hopefully being enjoyed by fellow fans. And just the fact that I'm somewhat a part of that is just really interesting. Like, it's just this interesting little fraction of this total stranger's life that I now have in my hands, something that was very important to him that's also very important to me because we share a similar fandom. And I don't know, it's just really surreal and interesting. And this doesn't really have much to do with Marie Kondo, but it's a neat story. So I thought definitely worth sharing. So thanks for reminding me about that, Sully.
Well, like I said, even though we're kind of talking about the KonMari method, I wanted to use it as a springboard for just more of ideas of like consumerism and fandom and how we can maybe be smarter consumers or better consumers or cut out the things that may or may not make us happy. And I think I sent an article to you both from the New Yorker, kind of talking about like they call it like the Japanization of America and how Japan and America's cultures are kind of becoming very similar, and our reaction to popular culture is becoming very similar. We're being put in this sort of arrested adolescence, and how we can kind of take the good parts of that and the bad parts of that. I know, Bill, you mentioned you kind of were struck by how the history of Japan's economy kind of played into like KonMari method thoughts.
Yeah, where the KonMari method was kind of born out of the Japanese bubble bursting, because during the 80s, Japan was on the rise, where they were making so much money in entertainment, in manufacturing, and technology, and were the premier kind of country when it came to tech. I mean, they mentioned William Gibson, who's a famous sci-fi writer, who kind of viewed Japan as the mecca of tech. Or it's also seen in movies like Blade Runner, as the article points out to a certain degree. But when the bubble bursts, a lot of people pride and sense of self-worth just evaporated, and they kind of fell into going into their nostalgia and going into fandom as sort of a incubator from the fallout of the bubble bursting. And I think it's kind of similar to where we are kind of as America right now, eerily, where we had the housing crisis in 2007, 2008, and now we're trying to kind of still get back on track economically.
And I'd argue even further back than that, sort of like the ripple effect of 9/11 sort of carries over in a lot of that, especially in our general cultural thought processes in the last 17 years or so.
Yeah, where I think because everything's just so more expensive now, just trying to rent just a one-bedroom apartment in a major city can run you up to $1,000 or more.
Yeah.
Where just the cost of living and the cost of healthcare can just be so astronomical that we go to our childhoods, we go to nostalgia, we go to our fandoms as sort of a blanket to kind of protect us from the outside world.
And we go to the Third Impact Anime Podcast. Yay!
Your podcast, yes. So I think that her idea is by getting rid of that nostalgia, by getting rid of that fandom to a certain degree, by getting rid of the kind of things that keep you feeling safe, you you'll be able to fully examine where you are in life and figure out where you want to go.
And I think that's a really important kind of way of putting it, is kind of allowing yourself to be vulnerable when you do get rid of things. She mentions, all the kind of excuses we go through and how, they really aren't valid excuses. I mean, I sold off some books. I'm like, I might read them again. Like, if you haven't read them in so long, then you're just holding on to it for a wrong reason. But I had one manga. It was the very first manga I ever bought. I bought it with my very own money. It was, don't make fun of me, it was Descendants of Darkness, because I was like one of the first animes I saw on like Chiller. And I was like, well, I know what this is, so I'll get the manga. And I held it, and I had it in the bin to sell at Ichiban Con, or Triad rather, and I held it and it didn't sell. I had it out, no one bought it, and I just looked at it and I thought, every time I hold this, I just am brought back to that moment of the first time I opened up a manga and had to teach myself, like, okay, this is how they read it, left to or right to left, or left to right, whatever. I can't tell directions right now. But like,
Sully, that sounds like a spark of joy.
It was. That's the point I'm giving to, is it was a spark of joy, and I held on to it, still on my shelf, and I think, if I were to get rid of it, I think I wouldn't feel quite right now. And maybe one day I can. Maybe one day I will be able to. I think that's an important thing to kind of look at this as. Things come and go in our lives. Objects are impermanent. So, we buy and sell things, and I think a good idea to see this as circulation, those books I hadn't read, I sold them, and now someone else is reading them, and then they'll be done. And maybe they'll hold on to them for years, and they'll be beloved books on their shelf, and then they'll sell them to someone else. And I think that's kind of like Austin and that tape is, I think a way we can connect this fandom is by allowing the things that we love and we treasure find their way out into the rest of the world.
To quote the patron saint of Pawnee, Aziz Ansari from Parks and Recreation, love is temporary, but things are forever.
Well, Sully, you say that we're able to part things and give it to someone that will probably enjoy it more, or Austin with your story of the tape, which I think is a really kind and loving story. But I think about myself, and I've kind of become a person that just buys my things digitally, or I'll use a streaming service like Crunchyroll or Netflix. So because the one thing the KonMari method doesn't really address is the digital world that we keep going towards. And I think that's going to keep happening as things become more digitized, where it just becomes that's our way of consuming things. And in the physical world, where I can buy a book and then sell it off at a secondhand store or give it to a friend that might care for it, I can't do that with my digital comics. I'm just curious, like, what do you guys think of our digital things?
I mean, digital things to a degree, they are things, but they're also not things because they don't really take up space. I guess, like, especially on streaming services, I think the best, like, the KonMari way of thinking about that would be like, well, just make sure that all of your stuff is very organized and it's like not all over the place. But that's kind of easy to do because you can just, click a button that says sort by, A to Z, and then it's, automatically organized. So I don't know, Bill, do you have like a personal stress about like digital content, like for yourself? So like how do you personally feel about how you're going with that?
Well, I just think of like the Netflix queue, because that always seems to be building and building and building. I think on my Netflix queue, I have like around 110 things, something like that. And the thing that can be anxiety about that is, am I going to watch this? Oh, it might get kicked off Netflix at the end of this month. I need to watch that. Or, I didn't finish this the full way. And that can also be applied to Crunchyroll or to my comic book subscription stuff like Marvel Unlimited of like, well, I'm paying for this, so I should take the time to read all of Brian Michael Bendis's run of Daredevil, but I need to do other things, and so that just can, I feel, sometimes create anxiety within me.
So I think that your issue is less about like these specific digital like movies or books or games that you have actually bought, and more about just like feeling the pressure of not being able to choose or prioritize the stuff that's available to you. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm going.
Okay, I've got a thought about that, but you go ahead, Sully.
So it's not covered in the book, but kind of the KonMari community has discussed this before, and I think digital media gives us a really great opportunity to kind of put a lot of these things in practice. So with streaming, my thing is there's a lot of series I like, but I'm not going to buy every single physical copy. Like, I bought Yuri on Ice and I bought the limited edition because it meant that much to me, but like I really like Yami Shibai, but like I don't really care that much that like I'm not going to like rush to it and think I need like comfort food anime, time to turn it on. I think streaming is a great way of like exposing ourselves to things without necessarily having to make like the financial commitment other than paying the streaming fee. So with that, I mean, the KonMari thing is like, there's two schools of thought. There was this one guy I know who mentioned, like, I have a lot of comic books, but I want to get rid of them. But what if I want them again? People are like, well, digitize them. Well, some people say, then you're just cluttering up your hard drive space. And I think there's a middle ground of, you know, really what do you want that badly to hold on to? Because nowadays, there's not as much lost media, at least not lost media that, you know, you're going to be kind of scrambling for. So like with the Netflix queue, like, yeah, it might be gone, but it's probably somewhere else. If you want to see it that badly, then you're going to like seek it out and like pay for it or torrent it. I don't know. I mean, I don't stress about that. And like I KonMari my YouTube playlists because I frequently keep like a watch later of like stuff that I want to see, usually documentaries. And then, you know, if I really just have not watched this, like obviously I don't care enough to watch it if I haven't yet, so I'm going to get rid of it. I think it's kind of going back to that thing I talked about in an article way back when, where it's like, you know, when you have so many choices, it becomes even more stressful just to make one, as opposed to when your choices are limited and you don't feel that pressure. So I think actually clearing out your Netflix queue is good, because honestly, if you really just have not seen it yet, then you're not going to see it yet. It's like the book thing. It's like if you haven't read it yet, you're not going to read it. So you should just give it back out into the universe.
And it's not like you can't, you know, decide that you want to check it out later. I mean, you don't have to make those final decisions. You can just make those decisions for you for like right now. Like there's been a couple times where I've gone through like my anime list and gone through my like plan to watch list and just been like, I don't care about that. I don't care about that. I'm never going to watch that. I don't want to watch that. And just cleared out like, you know, dozens and dozens of things and only left the stuff that I know that I really want to check out. So does that help?
Yeah. It basically sounds like you could apply the KonMari method of just discard the things that you're not really interested in. It's just digitized, not physical.
Right. So I guess you guys have anything you want to cover in closing?
I mean, if it helps, Bill, right now on my desk, I'm looking at this envelope I have scrawled with like manga and anime to watch while I have time over the summer in my horrific like serial killer handwriting. And I've had to cross out like, you know, I wrote this down when I thought it'd be like something I really want to watch, and now I'm like, yeah, I'd rather watch this first, or you know. So it's all a magical journey with KonMari. We're going to learn to be happy or something like that. If I have to make a final note, when talking about like fan stuff, also when you are looking for stuff to express your fandom, look for fan artists, because they don't get as much attention sometimes. Like my favorite anime t-shirt right now that I wear like all the time is a Fan Devilman t-shirt. I got it at a con. It was an artist who I love on Etsy, but I never felt like paying the shipping. And there she was, and I said, I want that shirt, and I got it, and I've worn it, like I wore it Saturday. So sometimes look for places that, might customize it for you or might make it something unique for you. I think we live in a world where we're so connected with other fans, and so many of them are so talented that sometimes it's great to go to them for, your stuff instead of going to like Great Eastern or whatever's making those horrific plushies that are put out in Hot Topics and FYEs and other places that stress me out.
Plus, you're supporting the fan community, because those people who are making the fan art and the fan T-shirts, they are fans, and they are making a living trying to show and support their fandom in their own way through their unique designs. Or
I want to temper that, though, with like buying official merch also helps the actual production of anime. So like it's a fine line to walk with.
Definitely.
Well, there's a difference between fan art and a bootleg. So just
this is true.
Bootlegs.
This is the whole
bootlegs.
This is a different tangent we can go down one day, I guess. But Bill, do you have any closing thoughts about KonMari or anything that we discussed?
I think while her method can be a bit extreme, I like it. Like when eventually I'll move, my idea is I'm just going to get rid of all my DVD cases and just put them in a CD case.
That makes me cringe.
All the DVDs I care about, because just moving all my DVDs, that just takes an extra storage box that could go to something else.
That's fair. That hurts me, but it's fair. I can't say that you're wrong.
This is Doubtfire Collection. You have no room to judge any of us for how we store our fandom.
You're so right. You're so right. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys about this really interesting and fascinating topic, and I hope that if anybody out there is listening, if you've learned anything or want to talk to us more about this particular topic, or really any topic related to fandom or expressions of fandom or anime or manga or whatever, feel free to always drop us a line at our many social media outlets, including Twitter, where we're pretty active on posting there. And our account is at TI_anime. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/thirdimpactanime. And we got our WordPress account, which is thirdimpactanime.wordpress.com, where we post cool articles and where Bill is screaming weekly about Lupin the Third, which we all enjoy reading. And I'm probably going to have a ensemble coverage article about Cutie Honey Universe coming out pretty soon, I hope, talking about the last couple of episodes that I still need to check out. And that's pretty much it. Sully, where can people talk to you about fandom crap on the internet?
You can find me, being the Otaku Martha Stewart, at Calvakun, that's CALVA_KUN on Twitter. Sorry iko desu. And it's a good thing in Japanese, and I'm so glad I learned that from like the official Japanese Martha Stewart site.
Wow.
I'm dedicated to this.
That just reminds me of Konnichiwa, Steven Spielberg des. And Bill, where can people talk to you about Hearthstone?
Not just about Hearthstone, also Lupin. Don't forget that. You can find me on Twitter at WBForeman999, but I don't really post a lot on Twitter. I'm more of an observer, so you can just find me a lot more on the press site, which I've already shamelessly plugged, so I'm not going to bother you again, loyal listener. But I highly recommend, if you are really into the spring season, we're doing a lot of coverage. I'm writing reviews for Megalobox, Lupin the Third. I've written stuff for the new Persona 5 anime that's out currently. And our newest member, Sarah, has been writing about the new Sword Art Online show and a bunch of other shows that are keeping us busy on the spring season. So
Yep.
all active on this front, and we've got Animazement coming up at the end of the month, which we'll be doing a lot of panels for, mostly Tobias because he is the most insane of the bunch, but myself included. And Marissa, I believe, is also doing some panels, and we'll be throwing out more info related to AZ stuff later on in the month. And as for me, like, you can talk to me on Twitter at Bebop Shock, and that's Bebop as in Cowboy Bebop, and Shock as in Bioshock. And that's the easiest place to talk to me about whatever. So thanks again, guys, for joining me. This has been a super good conversation. I think we had a lot of interesting thoughts, which is rare on this podcast. It's usually just a bunch of garbage. Myself being King Garbage. A title that I wear with absolute pride.
KonMari you then.
Probably. Just go ahead and toss me out. You'll get a spark of joy by putting me in the garbage can.
Do I get a spark of joy when I hold Austin? No.
Wow. All right. And with that sick burn, that's the end of our episode. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Konnichiwa. Steven Spielberg des.